Another one. Really, Kazvox pressed their face against the observation window, mandibles clicking in disbelief. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum of the orbital station, they watched a tiny figure moving across the jagged mountain landscape below. Control. Are you seeing this? Affirmative. Lead researcher, the bored voice of controller Pax Nem crackled through the comm. Though I fail to see what's so fascinating about another human wandering around. Kazvox adjusted their optical enhancers, zooming in on the subject. The human female, later identified as Nina Blackwood, was scaling a rocky incline with the casual grace of someone taking a stroll through a climate-controlled habitat. But that wasn't what had caught Kazvox's attention. "She's barefoot," Kazvox practically screeched, their crystalline exoskeleton rattling with excitement. On a Class 12 death world, walking on exposed rocks, in the sun. There was a long pause from control before Pax Nem spoke again, their voice notably less bored. "Confirm observation. Subject is traversing terrain without protective gear on their locomotive appendages." Confirmed. And she's smiling. Kazvox began rapidly entering notes into their datapad. Surface temperature readings indicate the rocks are at 48 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to cook the nerve endings of most species, yet she's just walking, like it's nothing. The observation room's door slid open with a soft hiss as senior researcher Mira Lux entered, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with curiosity. "What's all the excitement about? I could hear you from 3 corridors away." "Look at this." Kazvox pointed to the display screen, which showed a magnified view of Nina navigating a particularly treacherous stretch of terrain. The subject is completely ignoring basic safety protocols. No protective gear, no support equipment, not even a basic environmental suit. Mira Lux's patches flickered in surprise. "Fascinating and concerning. Has anyone notified emergency response?" For what Pax Nem's voice carried a note of amusement now. "These humans do this sort of thing all the time. Remember last week's specimen who was jumping off cliffs with nothing but a fabric wing?" "But this is different," Kazvox insisted, tracking Nina's progress as she hopped from rock to rock across a small stream. "Those extreme sports enthusiasts at least wear some kind of protection. This one is literally exposing her bare skin to one of the most dangerous environments we've ever studied." Earth had earned its reputation as a death world for good reasons. The planet's variable climate could swing from scorching heat to freezing cold in a matter of hours. Its surface was riddled with hazards: jagged rocks, poisonous plants, aggressive wildlife, and endless opportunities for fatal falls. The gravity alone was enough to crush most species' exoskeletons. Yet humans not only survived here, they thrived. "Look at her foot placement," Mira Lux noted, moving closer to the screen. "The way she adjusts her weight distribution. It's almost like she can sense the stability of each surface before fully committing her weight." "That's impossible," Kazvox muttered, but they noted it in their observations anyway. No species can process terrain data that quickly without technological assistance. As if to prove them wrong, Nina suddenly stopped, tilted her head, and changed her planned route. Moments later, a small rockslide crashed through the area she would have been crossing. "Did she predict that?" Pax Nem's voice was barely a whisper. No, Kazvox shook their head vigorously. "There must be a logical explanation. Perhaps she felt vibrations through her exposed feet, or noticed visual cues we can't detect from orbit." "Either way," Mira Lux said, "I believe we found our next research subject. Kazvox, prepare a full observation protocol. I want to know everything about this human and how she navigates her environment. And someone wake up the biology team. They're going to want to see this." As the 3 aliens watched, Nina reached a flat area and sat down, dangling her feet over a cliff edge that dropped away into a misty abyss. She pulled a water container from her pack, took a long drink, and then began singing, her voice carrying faintly through their atmospheric monitors. "She's not even scared," Kazvox whispered in awe. "What are these humans made of?" The question hung in the air as they continued their observation, none of them realizing that their understanding of human capabilities was about to be completely rewritten. Log entry 2387B, Earth Observation Station Beta. Research Team Assembly Priority Level 1. Subject: Comprehensive Analysis of Human Terrain Navigation. "You dragged me out of quantum calculations for this," senior scientist Ron Tor's voice boomed through the conference chamber, their massive form barely fitting in the standard issue chair. Unlike the crystalline forms of their colleagues, Ron Tor's species resembled something closer to a sentient mountain range, complete with its own weather patterns. With respect, senior scientist Kazvox projected their findings onto the main screen. This could revolutionize our understanding of human adaptability. The assembled research team watched the replay of Nina's morning hike. The room contained some of the brightest minds in xenobiology, each drawn to Earth for different reasons. Dr. Lena Phoenix, an energy-based life form who had to wear a containment suit to interact with physical matter, leaned forward with interest. Besides her, Professor Quantum Blake, whose 6 eyes blinked in alternating patterns, started taking notes with 3 of his hands while the other 3 tapped rhythmically on the table. Let me remind everyone why we're here, Mira Lux began, their bioluminescent patches shifting to a formal blue. 50 years ago, when we first classified Earth as a death world, we assumed humans were surviving through technological superiority. That assumption has cost the Galactic Research Council billions in misallocated research funds. Because they're not using technology at all, Dr. Phoenix interjected, her voice crackling like static through her containment suit speakers. They're naturally adapted to this nightmare of a planet. Ron Tor rumbled disapprovingly, causing small pencils to roll off the conference table. We've known this for years. What makes this particular human special? Kazvox switched to a split-screen display. On the left, standard human hiking behavior. Notice the protective footwear, equipment, safety gear. On the right, our subject Nina Blackwood. No protection, no support, just bare skin against one of the most hostile environments in charted space. Professor Blake's note-taking intensified. Fascinating. And you say she predicted the rock slide. That's what we need to find out, Mira Lux said. The Galactic Research Council has approved an expanded study. We're going to track this human's movements for the next 3 months. 3 months. Ron Tor's surface cracked slightly, showing the molten core beneath. Do you know how much that will cost? Less than the price of another failed colonization attempt, Dr. Phoenix pointed out. Remember the Proxima Centauri disaster? 3 colonies wiped out because we didn't understand how humans navigate their environment. The room grew quiet. Everyone remembered. The colonists had built their habitats to their own species standards, not realizing that what they considered stable ground was, by Earth standards, a disaster waiting to happen. Let me explain exactly why Earth terrifies us. Kazvox brought up a new display. Average gravity 9.8 meters per second squared, enough to shatter most exoskeletons. Temperature ranges from -89.2 to 56.7 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric pressure that would crush most species. Tectonic plates that are constantly moving, thousands of active volcanoes, regular earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes. Wait, we know all this, Ron Tor interrupted. But do we understand it? Mira Lux countered. Look at these readings from Nina's feet. She's processing environmental data faster than our best terrain analysis computers. The temperature variations alone should be causing severe nerve damage, but she's adapting instantly. Professor Blake raised 2 of his hands. Could it be technological enhancement? Hidden implants, perhaps. Scanned for those, Kazvox said proudly. Nothing. She's completely organic. Just a standard human female, walking across terrain that would kill most of us in seconds, without any protection whatsoever. And singing while doing it, Dr. Phoenix added, a note of admiration in her electronic voice. Ron Tor's surface cooled slightly, a sign they were beginning to be convinced. What's your proposal? Full spectrum analysis, Mira Lux said. We track every step, every decision, every adjustment she makes. We map her neural patterns when she's evaluating terrain. We figure out how she's doing this. And if we can understand that, Kazvox concluded, we might finally understand how humans conquered their death world. Not through technology, not through terraforming, but through pure biological adaptation. The room was silent for a moment before Ron Tor spoke again, their voice softer, causing only minor tremors in the floor. Very well. Approval granted. But I want hourly updates, and if she shows any sign of distress, we'll have emergency teams standing by, Mira Lux assured them. Though something tells me we won't need them. As if to emphasize the point, the main screen showed Nina executing a perfect leap across a 2-meter gap between rocks, landing gracefully on her bare feet, then stopping to admire a butterfly that had landed on a nearby flower. Humans, Dr. Phoenix whispered. They make the impossible look boring. The research team dispersed, each member already planning their part of the study. None of them noticed Hfy lingering behind, staring at the screen with a mixture of terror and admiration. They had a feeling they were about to witness something extraordinary. 20 credits, says she slips on the next ridge, Lieutenant Hfy announced, her tentacles waving excitedly as she monitored the tracking screens. The observation deck had become surprisingly crowded over the past week, with off-duty staff regularly gathering to watch Nina's expeditions. You'll lose that bet, Controller Pax Nem countered, sliding their credits into the pool. Haven't you noticed? She never slips. 40 credits says she finds a better path within 30 seconds. Hfy should have put a stop to the betting. It wasn't exactly within research protocols, but the impromptu gambling ring had actually improved data collection, with dozens of extra eyes tracking every detail of Nina's movements. By the 7 moons of Zexanthris, Dr. Phoenix exclaimed, her containment suit glowing brighter in excitement. Did anyone else notice she hasn't taken a direct path up any of these slopes? She's been zigzagging the whole time. Professor Blake, who had barely moved from his observation post for 3 days, nodded with all 6 eyes. She's not following the obvious route. Look at her thermal signature. She's actively seeking out surfaces with different temperature gradients. The assembled crowd watched as Nina navigated a particularly treacherous section of mountain. The path ahead looked stable enough to most observers, a relatively straight line up the slope. Instead, she kept changing direction, sometimes backtracking slightly, touching rocks with her toes before committing to each step. Another 100 credits says she's about to change course again, Professor Blake wagered, 4 hands already reaching for his credit chip. No bet, Hfy replied. Look at the seismic readings. Sure enough, Nina paused, wiggled her toes against the rock face, then chose a completely different route. Moments later, their sensors detected a subtle shift in the mountain's structure. The seemingly stable path she'd avoided was now showing signs of instability. That's the 47th time, Mira Lux noted, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with excitement. 47 times she's predicted geological instability before our sensors could detect it. The odds against that being coincidence are astronomical. Hfy was frantically recording every detail. Her neural patterns show no sign of conscious calculation. It's pure instinct. But how? How can she process that much geological data through just her feet? Watch this part, Ron Tor rumbled from the back of the room, causing several lighter species to bounce slightly off the floor. The massive senior scientist had become an unlikely regular at these observation sessions. She's approaching the steam vents. The crowd grew quiet as Nina neared a series of geothermal vents. The superheated steam shooting from these fissures could strip flesh from bones in seconds. Most species would give them a wide berth. Nina, however, seemed to treat them like a puzzle to be solved. 300 credits says she maps a safe path through them, Ron Tor announced. That's impossible, Lieutenant Hfy protested. The steam dispersion pattern is chaotic. There's no way to predict. She trailed off as Nina began to move. It was almost like a dance. Step, pause, shift, step again. She wove between the steam vents as if she could see the gaps in their eruption patterns. Her feet barely touched the ground between movements, each placement precise and confident. The timing, Dr. Phoenix whispered. She's not just feeling the ground, she's feeling the air pressure changes, the temperature variations, the vibrations through the rock. She's processing all of it simultaneously. New bet, Professor Blake announced. 500 credits says she stops for lunch on the other side of the vents. No fair, Pax Nem protested. You've memorized her eating schedule. True to prediction, Nina emerged unscathed from the steam vent field, found a sunny spot with a view of the valley, and pulled out her lunch pack. The observation deck erupted in a mixture of groans and cheers as credits changed hands. Look at her heart rate, Hfy pointed to the biorhythm display. Barely elevated. She's not even stressed. She just navigated a death trap that would require our most advanced environmental suits, and she's sitting there eating a sandwich like she just took a walk in the park. Speaking of which, Mira Lux added, has anyone noticed she actually seems to be enjoying herself? These aren't survival behaviors. This is recreation for her. The betting resumed as Nina finished her lunch. Would she take the ridge path or the valley route? Would she stop to examine more butterflies? Would she sing again? The research team had compiled more data in 7 days than most xenobiology studies gathered in months, though Hfy suspected half their notes consisted of variations on the phrase, "How is this possible?" One final bet for today, Ron Tor announced. their volcanic core glowing brighter. 1,000 credits says she teaches us something new about this death world before sunset. For once, nobody took the opposing bet. They'd all learned that when it came to Nina Blackwood and her barefoot exploration of Earth's most dangerous terrains, the impossible was just another word for hasn't happened yet. As if on cue, Nina stood up, stretched, and began making her way toward a section of the mountain that their sensors had classified as absolutely unsurvivable. The observation deck quickly filled with more researchers, all eager to see what she would do next. Storm system approaching from the northwest. Controller Pax Nem announced, their voice tight with concern. Temperature dropping at 2.3 degrees per minute. Barometric pressure plummeting. The observation deck had never been so quiet. The usual buzz of excited commentary and betting odds had been replaced by the tense silence of professionals watching a potential disaster unfold. Nina was halfway up a near-vertical rock face when the first signs of the storm appeared. "Someone activate the emergency beacon," Dr. Phoenix demanded, her containment suit flickering with anxiety. "We need to warn her." Negative, Hfy responded, though their crystalline form was vibrating with stress. "Direct interference is strictly forbidden. We're observers only." "Then we're about to observe a tragedy," Professor Blake muttered, all 6 eyes fixed on the screens. Temperature now -5 degrees Celsius and still dropping. Wind speeds approaching 90 kilometers per hour. Ron Tor's massive form shifted, causing minor tremors in the deck plates. She's trapped. Cliffs above, cliffs below. No shelter within reach. Even with proper equipment, survival chances in these conditions are. Look, Lieutenant Zara Pell's tentacles pointed frantically at the display. She's moving. Nina had pressed herself flat against the rock face as the first blast of Arctic air hit her. For a moment she was completely still, and Hfy feared she had frozen in place. Then she did something that caused half the observation team to cry out in alarm. She closed her eyes. "What is she doing?" Mira Lux demanded, their bioluminescent patches flashing in distress. "She needs to see to navigate." "No," Dr. Phoenix whispered, leaning closer to her screens. "No, look at her neural patterns. She's not shutting down, she's focusing, enhancing her other senses." They watched in stunned silence as Nina began to move. Her bare feet searched the rock face with impossible precision, finding tiny ledges and cracks that even their advanced scanning systems barely detected. Her fingers splayed against the stone, reading its texture like a book. "Report," Hfy barked, trying to maintain scientific detachment, all sensors active. "Wind speed now at 110 kilometers per hour," Pax Nem responded. "Temperature -12 Celsius. Precipitation beginning, mix of snow and ice." "How is her core temperature still stable?" Professor Blake demanded, checking and rechecking his readings. "She's practically naked by our standards, in conditions that would flash freeze most species." Nina continued her lateral movement across the cliff face, eyes still closed, face set in an expression of intense concentration. Each placement of her bare feet seemed random at first, until Dr. Phoenix highlighted a pattern on the thermal imaging display. "She's following a heat map," the energy being announced in awe. "The rock face retains warmth differently based on its mineral composition. She's using the temperature variations to find the most stable paths." "Impossible," Ron Tor rumbled. "No organic being has that level of thermal sensitivity in their extremities." "Humans do," Hfy corrected, rapidly updating their research notes. "We've been studying them for 50 years, and we're still discovering new sensory capabilities. They're not just surviving their death world, they've adapted to read it like we read data screens." A particularly violent gust of wind slammed into the cliff face, and for a heart-stopping moment, Nina swayed precariously on her perch. The observation deck erupted in a chorus of gasps and cries, but instead of panicking, she actually laughed. The sound carried clearly through their atmospheric monitors, a bright, almost wild sound of pure exhilaration. "She's enjoying this," Mira Lux stated in disbelief. "She's treating it like a challenge, not a crisis." "New readings," Lieutenant Zara Pell called out. "Her adrenal glands are pumping something different into her system, some kind of performance enhancement cocktail." "Endorphins," Professor Blake corrected, his note-taking hands moving at blur speed. "Natural hormones. Humans produce them in response to stress and exertion. But these levels are unprecedented." They watched as Nina began moving faster, more confidently, despite the deteriorating conditions. Her movements took on an almost predatory grace, each motion flowing into the next with liquid precision. She wasn't just surviving the crisis, she was adapting to it in real time. Storm reaching peak intensity, PAX-NEM reported. Temperature bottomed out at -15. Wind. Wait, what is she doing now? Nina had reached a section of the cliff that curved inward, creating a slight overhang. Instead of avoiding it, she swung herself into the space, bracing her bare feet against one wall and her back against the other. She was wedged securely in place, protected from the worst of the wind and precipitation. She created a shelter. Rontor observed, their volcanic core pulsing with something that might have been respect. No tools, no technology, just pure environmental awareness and physical adaptation. That's not all, Dr. Phoenix added. Look at how she's positioned. Maximum skin contact with the rock face. She's using the retained heat from the stone to help regulate her body temperature. The observation team watched in amazed silence as Nina waited out the worst of the storm in her impromptu shelter. She even pulled out a water bottle and took a few sips, as casual as if she were sitting in a cafe instead of clinging to a cliff face in near freezing temperatures. I think, Hfy said slowly, their crystalline form vibrating with excitement, we need to completely revise our understanding of human environmental adaptation. We've been so focused on their technology, their tools, their protective gear. But those aren't crutches they need to survive. They're just conveniences. Luxuries, Mira Lux agreed, their patches cycling through colors of amazement. Their bare skin capabilities exceed most of our environmental suit specifications. As if to emphasize their point, the storm began to abate, and Nina emerged from her shelter. She took a moment to stretch, actually wiggling her toes against the cold stone, then resumed her climb as if nothing had happened. The only sign that conditions were still dangerous was the slight steam rising from where her warm feet met the frozen rock. Update the classification, Rontor commanded, their voice carrying the weight of scientific authority. Humans aren't surviving on a death world. They are the death world. The planet didn't shape them. They shaped themselves to master it. The observation deck erupted in excited discussion, but Hfy noticed that for the first time in days, no one was placing bets. They had all finally realized that when it came to human capabilities, the safe bet was that there were no limits. Log entry 2387E, Earth Observation Station Beta. Special Topics Discussion Session. Subject Paradigm Shift in Human Studies. Play it again, Rontor demanded, their usually intimidating voice now soft with wonder. The observation team had gathered for an emergency review session, watching replays of Nina's crisis navigation. 43 separate decision points, Professor Blake narrated, his 6 eyes blinking in synchronized amazement. Each one made in a fraction of a second. No conscious calculation, no visible hesitation. Hfy stood before the assembled team, their crystalline form practically humming with excitement. We've been approaching this all wrong. Every single one of our previous studies started with the same flawed premise that humans are fragile beings who develop technology to compensate for their physical limitations. The main screen displayed a montage of Nina's journey so far. She moved across sun-baked rocks, through icy streams, over sharp gravel, and between thorny plants, her bare feet adapting instantly to each new terrain. Look at this, Dr. Phoenix directed their attention to a neural scan. When she encounters a new surface, her brain lights up in patterns we've never seen before. It's like she's tasting it with her feet, Lieutenant Zara Pell suggested, her tentacles waving thoughtfully. Exactly, Mira Lux's bioluminescent patches pulsed with revelation. We've been studying humans like they're separate from their environment, but they're not. They're part of it. They evolved as an integrated component of their death world. The screen showed Nina pausing at a fork in her path. To the alien sensors, both routes looked equally treacherous. She spent exactly 2 seconds testing each surface with her toes before choosing the left path. Stop there, Controller PAX-NEM called out. Geological scan overlay, please. The display lit up with subsurface data. The right path, while appearing stable, had a hairline crack running deep into the rock face. It would have collapsed under sustained weight. She knew. Rontor rumbled in amazement. With just her bare feet, she gathered more accurate geological data than our advanced scanning equipment. How is this possible? Because she's not scanning, Hfy replied, their voice filled with growing understanding. She's not analyzing, she's feeling. Every callus on her feet, every nerve ending, every muscle and tendon, They're all working together to read the environment in ways our technology can't match. Professor Blake activated another replay, this one showing Nina crossing a field of loose scree. Watch her weight distribution. It's constantly shifting, adapting to each tiny movement of the rocks beneath her feet. The level of proprioception required for this is beyond our previous models of human capability. And she does it all while admiring the view, Dr. Phoenix added, her containment suit glowing with what might have been envy. No fear, no stress, just pure connection with her environment. The team watched as Nina navigated a particularly challenging section of terrain. She moved with fluid grace, her feet finding purchase on surfaces that looked impossibly unstable to the observers. We need to rewrite the textbooks, Mira Lux declared. All our assumptions about human fragility, about their dependence on technology, they're completely wrong. Their tools aren't crutches, they're optional accessories. Like their shoes, Lieutenant Zara Pell noted, they don't wear them because they need them. They wear them because they choose to. Comfort over necessity, Kazvox agreed. Think about that. They've become so well adapted to their death world that they can add layers of separation from it simply for comfort. The screen showed Nina stopping to examine a flower growing from a crack in the rocks. She balanced perfectly on one foot, the other tucked up like some kind of earth bird, seemingly unconcerned about the 100-meter drop beside her. Their technology fooled us, Rontor said, causing minor tremors as they shifted position. We saw their environmental suits, their protective gear, their climate-controlled habitats, and we assumed they needed these things to survive. But look at her. Look at what humans can do with nothing but their natural abilities. It's not just survival, Dr. Phoenix added. She's thriving out there. Every challenge the environment presents, she meets it with. Is that a smile? Is she humming again? Indeed, Nina had begun singing softly to herself as she planned her next route, her bare toes tapping out a rhythm on the warm rock. New research proposal, Kazvox announced. We've been studying humans as survivors of a death world. I suggest we start studying them as natural extensions of it instead, not as beings who conquered their environment, but as beings who became one with it. The observation team watched as Nina began moving again, her pace quickening as she found a rhythm in her movement. Every step looked random to their eyes, but the data showed otherwise. She was performing a complex dance with the landscape, each motion precisely calculated by millions of years of evolutionary programming. Look at her biosignatures now, Professor Blake pointed out. Complete harmony between physical exertion and environmental conditions. She's not fighting the death world, she's part of it. And Rontor concluded, their volcanic core glowing with newfound respect, have been completely wrong about humans from the very beginning. They're not weak, they're not fragile. They're the most perfectly adapted species we've ever encountered. As if to punctuate their revelation, Nina reached a particularly challenging obstacle, laughed out loud, and proceeded to navigate it with the kind of casual confidence that made the impossible look easy. The observation team fell silent, each member lost in thought about the implications of their discoveries. They had come to study how humans survived their death world. Instead, they were learning that perhaps it had never been a death world at all, at least not to those who had evolved to dance with its dangers. Log entry 2387F, Earth Observation Station Beta. Urgent critical event documentation. Note: multiple emergency protocols overridden. New biosignature detected. Controller Pax Nem's voice cut through the routine chatter of the observation deck. Another human on the mountain. Readings indicate severe distress. The screen shifted to show a wider view. Half a kilometer from Nina's position, another hiker had become stranded on an unstable ledge. Unlike Nina, this one was fully equipped with professional climbing gear, yet somehow in far greater danger. Catastrophic equipment failure, Professor Blake reported, his hands flying over multiple consoles. Their safety harness is disintegrating. Some kind of chemical reaction with the rock face. Fascinating. Focus, Kazvox snapped. What are the survival odds? Rontor's surface cooled rapidly as they calculated. Without immediate assistance, 0. That ledge will collapse in approximately 3 minutes. Nina's spotted them, Dr. Phoenix announced, her containment suit crackling with tension. Look at her vitals. She's accelerating. The observation team watched in stunned silence as Nina completely changed her behavior pattern. Gone was the careful testing of surfaces, the methodical route plotting. She moved across the deadly terrain like water flowing downhill, her bare feet barely touching each point of contact before moving to the next. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Zara Pell whispered, her tentacles curling in anxiety. "She's crossing terrain that our sensors classify as absolutely unsurvivable at speeds that should shatter every bone in her body." Mira Lux finished, their bioluminescent patches strobing with excitement. "Look at the impact forces. Each landing would crush our strongest exoskeletons." Nina's path seemed random at first, until Professor Blake highlighted her trajectory. She's not taking the shortest route, she's taking the fastest sustainable route. The difference is crucial. 1 minute to ledge collapse, Pax Nem called out. The other human's safety harness is now completely compromised. The observation deck had become crowded as word spread through the station. Even the maintenance crews had stopped work to watch. Nina was now moving in ways that defied their understanding of physics, her bare feet finding purchase on surfaces that shouldn't have supported her weight. 45 seconds, Ron Tor rumbled. "She's not going to make it." "She already has Kazvox countered, their crystalline form vibrating with revelation. Look at her route. She's not trying to reach the ledge, she's positioning herself." The stranded hiker's harness gave way with a sudden snap. They fell backward, arms flailing, a scream cutting through the atmospheric monitors. But instead of plummeting to their death, they fell directly into Nina's carefully plotted position. "Contact," Dr. Phoenix exclaimed. "But the momentum. They'll both fall." Nina's bare feet spread wide against the rock face, toes gripping microscopic holds that even their best scanning equipment barely registered. Her muscles tensed in patterns that Professor Blake was frantically recording, distributing the impact force in ways that their physics models insisted were impossible. "How?" Lieutenant Zara Pell demanded. "How is she compensating for twice the mass on a surface that shouldn't support even one human?" "She's not just using her feet," Mira Lux realized, their patches pulsing with understanding. "Look at her full body readings. Every muscle, every tendon, every point of contact with the rock. She's turned herself into a living shock absorber." The rescued hiker was babbling in panic, but Nina's voice came through clearly on their monitors. "Got you. Now here's the fun part." Ron Tor's surface cracked in disbelief. They're still in a critically unstable position. But Nina was already moving, somehow carrying both her own weight and her rescued companions. She didn't try to climb back up. Instead, she began a controlled descent, using the mountain's natural features in ways that had the entire research team shouting contradictory physics equations at each other. "This violates at least 7 laws of biomechanics," Professor Blake muttered, all 6 eyes wide with wonder. "She's not even fully conscious of what she's doing. These movements are pure instinct." "No," Kazvox corrected softly. "Not instinct. Evolution. This is what 50 million years of adaptation to a death world looks like. This is what we've been missing all along." They watched as Nina guided both humans safely to a wide ledge, finally setting her still trembling companion down. The rescued hiker immediately began checking their equipment, trying to understand what had gone wrong. Nina, meanwhile, simply sat down, stretched her toes, and pulled out a granola bar. "Are you seeing this?" Dr. Phoenix demanded. "She just performed what our species would consider a military-grade rescue operation, barefoot, on unsurvivable terrain, and now she's having a snack." "Because to her, it's not unsurvivable terrain," Mira Lux said, their voice filled with awe. "It's not even difficult terrain, it's just home." Ron Tor's massive form shifted, causing several smaller species to grab for support. "Proposal: we need to completely restructure our approach to human studies. We've been treating them like survivors, like beings who conquered their environment through technology and determination. But they're not survivors, they're not conquerors. They're natives," Kazvox finished. "True natives of a world we called deadly simply because we couldn't understand how anyone could live there naturally." The observation deck fell silent as they watched Nina finish her snack, give some water to the still shaken hiker, and then stand up, wiggling her toes against the sun-warmed rock. "Update the classification files," Ron Tor commanded. "Earth is no longer to be designated as a death world. It is to be recognized as the cradle of one of the most environmentally adapted species we've ever encountered. And add a warning. Any attempt to understand humans must begin with the recognition that their technological achievements are not compensation for weakness, but rather extensions of natural capabilities we are only beginning to comprehend." As if to put a final point on their revelation, Nina helped her rescued companion to their feet, pointed out the safest path back to the marked trail, then turned and began making her way up an even more challenging route, humming softly, her bare feet dancing across the deadly terrain as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Which the research team finally realized it absolutely was.